think that's cool?
It's only for special signs.
Okay.
Okay.
It's an adult movie then. Okay. Okay.
You can start.
Here we have. Now I can start. Okay. Here we have a Japanese white pine, Pinus parviflora, which was imported from Japan a couple of years ago. It is, if you ask my opinion, a seedling, meaning it was found like this, possibly even in the wilderness. So a tree that does not come from the garden, but from the mountains, possibly. At least I can tell from the character of the nebari and the bark. I cannot see any signs of ever grafting onto black pines, which is artistically very good. Horticulturally, I will explain later, is a bit problematic. And it's quite rare. It's not easily easily found, and it's also not so easy to style these. So I got this as raw material, just 5 trunks, very raw, about I think 5 years ago, and this tree I wired and fixed as it is now. And the wire is already on since 3 years, which is fine. Keep going another year. On this kind of old collected trees, the wire can stay on for much longer than most people think. So this can only be seen as a combination, like all 5 trunks together, not as one single trunk. And I think it has a very nice natural feeling. It looks like this group grew in the forest. So that's exactly the aim. So for me, that's an example that also on Japanese trees, you can certainly apply the naturalistic style. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's nothing against the Japanese. A lot of them would also do it. They don't call it a naturalistic style, but they do it. It's only that we see a lot of that, what we think is typical Japanese styled, slightly overstyled for my personal taste, and think that is Japanese. No, there's so many facets in Japan, but then they're not so popular, meaning the naturalistic trees were popular 40 years ago. In the 1970s or so, they were normal if you look at the old Koku Futen books. And now we have these very well-styled, over-styled trees, in my opinion, and which are the fashion at the moment, but that will change again. So in parallel, there will always this kind of trees, also in Japan, and certainly here in Europe. Now, I cannot see that I want to import a Japanese tree and then make it more Japanese than a Japanese. That would be silly. First of all, I probably don't succeed, but if I succeed, so what? Who is going to praise me or what? So if I get something like that, I think it's a very nice piece of material. I would have liked this to be a European tree also, in this quality, very rare to find. So anyway, so the result is this 5-trunk group, which should more or less stay as it is. So artistically, I would suggest to not make it any denser, like make these poodly-looking, broccoli-looking, plastic-looking sort of branches, which are very often done, and people think, wow, this is very Japanese, very orthodox. No, this is commercial Japanese. The Japanese know very well that this is overdone, but they think the market wants that. People pay for that, and this is why they do it. They do it for selling these trees. So just as an art form, and this was I never did for selling. I never did this for making money. You better do something that you like, and that's something that somebody else will buy. So anyway, for some good reason, this tree found its way into Sebastian's garden. It's now Sebastian's tree. Now Sebastian has to understand how to care of this tree, and it is not easy. Now listen very carefully. I have said it and written it quite often in the past 40 years, that white pines are very problematic trees. I know what I'm talking about. I've killed about 40. I've killed 40 white pines, and I still have one. Oh. So I know people who have killed more than that. So they used to be dying left and right. We found that the ones that are rooted on, grown on black pine, grafted on black pine, they are the better survivors, but usually they don't look quite as good or natural. And the question is, why do they die? Well, let's see, why do they survive? Because in some gardens, it's very strange. In some gardens, people have no problem with them. And in some gardens, in most gardens, they actually do have big problems. And I have carefully looked into this, because I said it cannot be that every year we import something like 50,000 white pines, and 5 years later we only have a couple hundred left. That's not a good idea. And why do these trees survive in Japan without any problem? So you have to understand that it is not like other trees which need a very good protection in winter. This is a high mountain tree. It is coming from a part of the country where it's very cold, where it's freezing, where there's a lot of snow, and it wants that. Okay, number one, listen carefully. Overwinter in your garden, and not in a greenhouse, not in your garage. Put it out in where the sun meets it, where the rain meets it, and the snow meets it. You protect it from wind. Maybe you put it at a fence or at a wall of a house. Make sure the sun does not fully get it all day. In winter, when the tree is frozen and the sun hits it, then it evaporates and then it's drying out. And make sure it's kind of wet. This tree or moist all the time. This tree expects a climate as it is in the high mountains, where there's always some mist, some rain, cold, cool, moist. The whole very high humidity, and then it's happy in winter. Okay, if you look further into this, if we take the same tree and put it in a greenhouse like most people do, you may have a problem, especially if you have a small greenhouse with sun, and then you have it's heating up the sun. The greenhouse effect is enormous, totally underestimated if you not familiar with that. It's getting like 30 degrees in winter, which is about in the high 80s Fahrenheit, and it's very dry in there. It's more desert climate. Very, very bad for this tree. Why is that? Very much like the spruce, the European spruce, or as they call it, the Norway spruce, and the Ezo spruce, the Japanese spruce. Also, this kind of tree does the following in winter. It's almost stops growing. It grows very little, and it drops its fine roots. The fine roots, and only through the fine roots the tree can get moisture and minerals. Okay, so the meaning, this tree in winter has no roots. It can only survive if it's kept moist up here, which it normally does in the mountains or out in your garden. And if that does not happen, then you can spray it. Please don't water much here, because the roots are not really working. Spray this. I have had quite a few also recently, and because they are not as expensive as they used to be anymore in Japan, you can buy them for much less than so that's a wonderful chance we now have. However, I bought some very expensive ones, and because they were so expensive, I put them in the greenhouse and they died. And the less expensive ones I put out in the garden and they survived. I learned one lesson. Okay, and then I gave this a lot of thought and study and analyzed this, and I think that is the reason why they survive, because I happen to know that exactly the same applies to spruce. Do never ever overwinter a spruce in a greenhouse, in a small greenhouse which dries out. In big greenhouses like a professional gardening people have, where with a lot of moisture, that's okay. but amateurs usually have very small greenhouses which are dangerous. So a spruce always must be out in the garden. It's much better in the garden than it is in the greenhouse for the same reason, because a spruce really doesn't have functioning roots in winter. Okay, so that's my message number one. Overwinter it cold. Then they say, well, this is Zagreb, which is in the north of Croatia, and it's close to the Alps. While it is a milder climate, it can well be minus 20 degrees in Zagreb sometimes. It does happen in the past 10 years. 12, 15 degrees is normal. That's quite cold. Okay, not for this tree. It can be frozen stiff. It's much better than being in a nice warm greenhouse where it dries to death. Okay, so lesson number 2. Listen carefully again, because you might kill your tree if you don't listen now. Why do these trees die? I still have no answer, but I learned one thing. When I was trying to be very nice to them, like feeding them with chicken dew or something that smells, very soon afterwards, many of these little green things turned yellow and were dead afterwards. So after a while, I saw, oh, there is a lesson. Okay, every time I use some chicken dew or some guano, 3 weeks later, part of the tree dies. Meaning that was not nice. I don't know why, but the tree did not like it. So don't do it on 5-needle pines, because I also have Sembra pines, which is the Swiss stone pine, which is very closely related. That's the Swiss stone pine is the European answer to Japanese white pine. Okay, it's a 5-needle pine. I don't know quite why, but I can tell you as a fact that I did notice not once but several times that all the 5-needle pines, meaning the Japanese white pine and the European Swiss stone pine, Pinus sembra, have losing branches or even whole trees after a few weeks after I have fertilized them organically, trying to be very nice to the tree. Don't ask me why, but I tell you one thing: never ever throw anything at these trees that stinks. That just may well be that you kill that tree. One theory would be that they are highly dependent on their mycorrhiza, and a strong feed fertilizer can kill the mycorrhiza. That's possible. Okay, that may be one answer. We don't know, but at least we know that I can tell you for sure, since I have stopped feeding these organically, I have very little fatalities anymore in summer. As I told you, they tend to die over winter because they don't like to be in a warm, dry greenhouse. But in summer, part of it turns yellow after fertilizing organically. So it's very easy to stop that. Then you will always find a person who tells you, well, I have very good experiences with that and I've always fertilized organically. Don't listen to these people. They have maybe one tree and they don't know why that survived. I have about 50 or so Zembra pines, and I had about 40 or 50 white pines, so more than most people ever. So I have more experience in that. And that's about it. This kind of tree does not want...
So then we feed them with what?
With normal chemical fertilizer, which is used for any sort of plant. Could also be potatoes or flowers or whatever you get buy in the garden center.
Okay.
Do not feed them with anything that smells.
Do we have some favorable ratio of NPK or?
Yes, the next thing is, now we come to the question, why do these trees die so easily? I have the following feeling that those who tell me that they have no white pines dying have no clue why. Because the fact is that in most gardens they do have a tendency to be weakened and many times die. And in some gardens, they look very happy. And those gardeners think that they're the better gardeners. I think they are just lucky. They don't know why. I also don't know why, but I have some suggestions. Suggestion number one is, this tree in Japan does, by the way, not die. They don't have this problem that it's not a very touchy tree. So for them, it's a normal tree. So there may well be some micronutrients, some micro minerals which this tree gets in Japan, which it does not get in most gardens in Europe. In some waters or some substrates it may be. That's suspicion number one. Suspicion number two is, okay, start like this. Do you know why the native population of North America was almost extinct 100 years, 50 years ago? Was it because the white man shot all the Indians? No. The Indians died because of diseases that the Europeans brought to them. Like the normal flu, like things that our kids have and we have no problem, and that was deadly for them. Okay. Another thing is, do you know why it's strictly forbidden to import any trees from North America to Europe? Because they could bring some disease, which there in North America is nothing, and here kills our forest. It happens. Okay, if you understand that, you will understand there may be something here in Europe, some fungus, some whatever, which every tree knows, and which they learned how to survive with that over millions of years, but for this tree, it's dangerous. It's not quite deadly, but it's dangerous. Meaning, if the immune system of the tree is weak, it gets a disease. It's like human beings. So if you are strong and powerful and you can walk through masses of people, and because there's a lot of things that you could get, but you don't get them. However, if your body is weak, you bet next day you're sick. Okay, so I think the latter is probably the truth. There must be something in our world which can kill that tree. In some gardens, it happens that it's not there. Okay, and they are the lucky ones who don't know why. Same thing, by the way, applies to the Juniperus communis, which is the normal, regular, common juniper, which has a tendency to die as a bonsai. I think for the same reason, because in the same gardens, for some how they survive. Anyway, so if you understand this with the immune system, my trick is the following: be as nice as possible to that tree to keep him happy and healthy, and he will not get this disease. The minute he's weak, if you forget to water him a couple of days, and then it's weak, and then a week later, it has it. Okay.
When was this reported, and how long should it stay in the same pot without repotting? Same like your previous tree?
Well, you have to. There's not an easy answer to that. In general, if you have a developed tree which is looking as it should look, so this should not grow more, it should not be denser. The contrary, it's already dense enough. If anything, less dense. So this is finished, only the wire taken off and done. Maybe in 3 years another wire, but this is not going to be any bigger. So the answer is, if that's the case, try to avoid repotting as far as possible, even to the extent to never repot. But never means like 20 or 30 years. That's very long. And you think, well, Walter, what are you saying? Come on, I have done it. There's people who have also a lot of collected trees, like Dan Robinson from Washington, USA, and he says never ever repot anything. I think that's brutal. That's dramatic. Well, of course, he also kills trees by never ever repotting. So you cannot be absolute like this.
Yeah, that's it. Almost never.
But the tendency is, yes, I say almost never, meaning like 10, 20 years, which is very, very long for normal standards. So try to not repot this unless it's getting very weak. And when you repot it, don't cut off too many roots. Just rake them out maybe a little and then put them back into a very well draining and aerating substrate. maybe this kind of tree needs a little moisture in the soil or substrate. So I prefer to put some peat there or coconut fibers, which keep more moisture. You could also take, which is a novelty very recently, Marius Fulde from Poland is now offering fired akadama that he fires himself, which is not is affordable, not as expensive as the Japanese anymore. And that fired akadama has all the properties of akadama, but it doesn't decompose. Coming to the akadama, you may have heard that I hate akadama. That's because it actually kills this kind of tree. If I never repot it, if I had it in akadama, that wouldn't be not a good idea. Okay, so however, if it's fired akadama, then you certainly can have it. So what can happen with this tree? Well, first of all, at one point you take off the wire, which is very ugly, but it does the job. So the next thing is you may eventually wire it again. It does get slightly off color here and there. So this is a sign of this time of the year. In winter it starts to look a bit like grayish green when it gets cold. Keep it nice. It is very short here. Don't ask me why exactly. If this would someday become yellow, I would not be very surprised. Does it matter? No. It's perfectly okay if you, for design reasons, take these two, which seem to be very weak, take them off, because the tree has this tendency to go over there anyway. Yeah. So then it has this powdery white thing, which is, did you see that here?
Yeah, I saw it.
It's dead already. This is some sort of mildew or what. I have sprayed it and it's dead. It's only the rest, but it's okay. It doesn't kill the tree, but it's not very good for the tree either. You spray it with something like, for example, diluted lime sulfur or some oxalic acid I put over it. Otherwise, this tree is happy, and you have to pluck some needles if it gets too dense, and that's about it. It has, for this species, very small short foliage. That's as small as it gets naturally. It's not a dwarf variety. It's just because it was not repotted for a long time. It's like that. So,
how long did you say?
For how long?
For how long wasn't that repotted?
4 years.
4 years. Okay.
Now the pot is fine. I think I like it very much. It's from Milan Klika from Czech Republic. I like it very much. So you could also plant this on a rock, by the way. Would look very good on a stone. Okay.
Are we done?
So be careful with this, and you must, in general, this what I spoke about, the weakness of white pines. I do understand the same thing happens in North America, so it's not a unique European thing. Also, they have big problems with white pines. If you buy a white pine, be careful with it. It's a weaker tree for some strange reasons. We don't know why. And you have to live with the fact that it's always slightly in danger. That's included in the price, because if the same tree were another species, it would be much more expensive. Okay, that was it. Good luck in your new home. Okay, it will be reported to me how you're doing.